Welcome everybody in person and welcome everybody online. We're very happy to be here at Sravasti Abbey and to be interviewing and speaking with the venerables who are involved with the prison Dharma project. So we have Venerable Jigme, Venerable Ngawang, and Venerable Gyatso. So thank you all for being with us. So we haven't yet really spoken. This is something which happens in Buddhist monasteries and Buddhist circles, is prison outreach, and we haven't actually interviewed anybody about what that actually entails. So would love to hear maybe about how each of you got into this prison work and what it actually looks like here at Sravasti Abbey.
So I got into it when maybe 1999 or 2000. Venerable Chodron asked me to mail out a quarterly newsletter to the incarcerated, and she had a list of folks. And so I started doing that, and the way that she got involved in it is her contact information was in one of the first books that were published, and so a fellow from a prison somewhere wrote her and asked her questions about Dharma, and she answered, and then pretty soon here comes more and more and more and more like that, because the guys in prison pretty much share everything if they get good information about something, because there's not much there that they can access, I would say. So I started doing that. I was still a lay person, and we kind of expanded it by creating some DVDs of Venerable Chodron's teaching on mind training, like the rays of the sun. So that whole series we made. And we had some CDs that had some things on. We don't use those so much anymore, but we still send out the packages of DVDs to different institutions. And then we write to the inmates when they write us, and we keep it very focused on Dharma. So there's nothing personal about what we share. It's only questions about Buddhism. And then we have a bunch of books that we've gotten. Many of them are for free distribution from Singapore that we get. And so we have quite a lot. And then Lama Yeshe Wisdom Archive is another one that we get books from to send out to the inmates. And over the years, I had volunteers helping. We used to address the envelopes ourselves and put stamps on. A lot of these, hundreds of these. We have a database now. It kind of runs around 1,000. So before it was that big, we did that, and it started getting way too wieldy, and then we started doing it in-house here. And now we have a printing company that does it, and so it's as streamlined as it can be. And we spend our time mostly writing to the guys. And it's mostly men, because women are socialized a bit different, and in the prisons that they're in, they kind of take care of each other, whereas the guys, not so much. And so they're reaching out a lot. So it's more men than women. Sometimes some women, but more men than women.
So I started to get involved, I think maybe 2016 or 17. Venerable Chodron started to give me these letters to type, and I didn't really know what I was doing. She said, just, type this letter, and type this other letter, and, and around, I guess it was 2018, 2019, I realized that what she was doing was compiling materials for a book that she was writing with Calvin Malone, who had been incarcerated. and she was basically having me type all of these letters that were stories from incarcerated people. And so I was helping with that. So I think that was my first sort of contribution to the prison project. And then when I was still a layperson, I started also writing to incarcerated people. And I was doing that for, I think, years before actually moving here. And I would pick up mail from the mailbox and bring it up here and write letters. And at one point, I think I was emailing the letters I wrote here, and then they would be printed and sent off. So I was involved in that way, and that just continued as I've moved in and gotten ordained. But there's this other way that I have entered the prison work. And that is, when I was living in Spokane in 2017, I was approached by someone who knew of the group that was teaching nonviolent communication in the local prison. And they were looking for other people, other volunteers to go into the local prison and teach in BC. And so, I met with them and then I started. And so I was doing that all the way up until COVID, I guess. And so that was my entry into actually going into prisons. So did that for several years. And then just before COVID, I knew that there was a Buddhist group happening at the prison, Airway Heights Correctional Center. And it was run by these two lay women, and I was curious, like, what's going on there? And so I just wanted to visit the group. And so I did that for several times. It was a different tradition. I wasn't really sure. I just sort of watched. Then, as things happen, one of the women had a family health issue that she had to go away, and so she couldn't be part of the group. And then it was just me and this other woman. And then that woman had her own health concerns, and so she had to step back from being part of that group. And so there I was. It was like, okay, well, this is just me now. And so I met with the guys a few times, and then COVID hit. And obviously, as we all know, things just shut down. And so this was one of the opportunities that I was really, really enjoying and finding very meaningful when I was living in Spokane. And all of a sudden, I couldn't go anymore. And it was really hard for the guys, as I learned much later, because these incarcerated people were coming from different units inside the prison. And so during COVID, they couldn't actually meet and support one another. And so they really lost years of their Dharma practice. They lost that support because they couldn't meet together. Actually, the Religious Activities Center, which is the building that we meet in, turned into a clinic, like a hospital during COVID. So they had to clear out the library, they had to put in hospital beds. And so it was several years, I guess, after COVID, where they were actually converting it back into a religious activities center. And that's around the time, I think it was maybe 2022 or 2023, actually. I think it was 23 when we started to go in. It was Venerable Jigme and I, and then Venerable Gyatso joined, and we started to go in after COVID. And so now we have we facilitate a weekly Dharma class at Airway Heights Correctional Center for a small group, but a quite steady group. And they are just so appreciative of having the Dharma and having that support.
And for me, I knew, because it was on the website, I knew they had a prison project here, so I was already interested in it, because I knew these are people who are vulnerable, they've been thrown away by society, they really need the Dharma, they really need our help, and so I was already on fire, excited about it. So even my first month here, I was checking out, like, who's in charge of the prison project, I gotta find out. So I remember I wrote a note to Venerable Jigme and I said, if you need any help with the prison project, let me know. And I was jumping in the deep end when I hadn't even been here a month, So I kind of slowed down a little bit. And then eventually over time, just like Venerable Nawang said, all of a sudden Venerable Chodron would just put a letter in my hand and say, type this out, please. Or, here's something, can you proofread this, please? And so over time, I just got used to doing this. And then Venerable Damcho trained me on how to check the database, because before we send them out, we want to make sure, because they get moved around so much and people go in and out so much, so we make sure the database is checked and looking good before we send all these newsletters out. And that takes a long time, because like she said, there's over 1,000 men on this. And then I started writing some letters, and Venerable Nawang was kind enough to show me how to do that. It's a process, learning the correct things to say. And so it was kind of a slow process of getting used to our program and what we do, and making malas, which is really cool for them. They really appreciate having this support. And I think just having someone on the outside like us who cares about them and is willing to send them things and check in on them, I think is really like a lifeline for them. And it's just so small, but so huge in their life, I feel like, just having someone there for them.
In terms of, thank you all for that work, and just hearing about it is moving. In terms of saying the right things, what are the right things? Like what, if you had to write a book of Dharma for prisoners, what are the teachings which actually keep resonating again and again, that you've actually find genuinely helpful, that they're genuinely interested in? Is it, communication, or is it meditation, or sila? Just if you could speak about what things you keep see resurfacing, keep on seeing resurfacing.
So the difficulty in the prisons is that they kind of are interested in Buddhism, and they just start reading different books, and they read from all traditions and all everything, and then they mush it all together. And some of them also are doing Native American things, and we got a guy in the group that's been going to the Jehovah's Witness group for 4 years and learning that. So it's this soup thing that they create in there. So it's interesting. I guess I would say it's more about the relationship that we build with them. And once we kind of get a relationship going, in terms of we're there for them, we answer their questions, and we respect them, and they can count on us, all of those things. And so then they start opening up, and then we give them something of the Dharma that's related to kind of what they're struggling with now, or what's going on now for them. So it's more like that, I think.
Just a brief follow-up on that is, how many letters would you have written, say, in one of your longer relationships with one of these prisoners? How many letters would have gone back and forth?
I brought one today from a guy that I've been writing to probably maybe 9 or 10 years, I would say. And I'll read what he wrote. It's interesting. So yeah, some long time, others they write once, and in terms of what's the right things to say, often they will write and say, I would like 6 books and 3 malas and 4 mats and a cushion, and you have a Tibetan rug, please, and some prayer flags, So they're shopping. And so, we write back and say, we will send you 1 book, and then read the book, and then write us about how that book affected your mind. And the ones that do that, then we continue. If they don't do that, we're done, So that's how we do it, because it's not helpful to just... Because what they do is they know people that are Buddhist, and so they barter the books away for cigarettes or whatever. So that's what happens in prison, you know, so. Yeah.
Thank you. And would either of you have anything to add about what you found to be the salient notes?
Yeah, I think one of the teachings that I think they really resonate with, for obvious reasons, is the teaching on purification. How to look back in their past and make peace with what they've done. Really thinking about the four opponent powers, really generating sincere regret for what they've done, generating this feeling of relying on the Buddhas and repairing their relationships with those who they've harmed, doing some remedial action, which involves prostrations, and some of the monastics here have been to Airway Heights and have shown them how to do prostrations, like to the 35 Buddhas, for example. So a remedial action, so some sort of virtuous practice, or even just some sort of beneficial virtuous action can be a remedial action to really turn the energy away from negativity. And then a resolve, determining not to do that action again. So it's something very practical that I've seen people, really resonate with.
And I come back a lot to precious human rebirth and impermanence. Your life is meaningful. You can do something really important with your life and really useful. And every day you wake up, you can set this vast motivation to benefit countless sentient beings. So you're incredibly, incredibly fortunate to have interest in the Dharma, to have met it, and to have a group of practitioners who are supporting you instead of, getting down on yourself. There can be a lot of shame in prison, and it's very violent. There's a lot of harsh things that are going on. But with impermanence, it's like you are not a permanent bad person. We've all done harmful things. And I haven't gotten caught and put in prison, and you have. And so, we're very similar. All sentient beings just wanting to be happy and free of suffering. So, you can do the purification practices, and you can accumulate an incredible amount of merit with this precious human rebirth. So let's use it wisely, and I'm going to support you the whole way.
I definitely want to come back to Jigme, and would love to hear some of that letter. But would also just like to ask for clarification. When you go in, are you just meditating with the prisoners, or are you serving a counseling role, or what is the actual in-person conversation or practice look like?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of that. We try to get a structure going. We set up an altar, and there's a Buddha, and we've taught them some of the prayers, refuge, bodhicitta, etc. And then often go around the room to just kind of to check in. Sometimes somebody has something that's kind of big and burning, and so then that gets the attention. If not, then we start with some meditation, and and some of them have so much trouble. It's so chaotic in there, they're sitting there and they're doing this with their leg, and so to get them to even calm down takes a lot. And then we are using a book that Venerable Chodron wrote, How to Meditate, and so we're going through that slowly, and we give them things to do during the week and see how that is when they come back, and see what they've done, if they learned anything, and like that. So it's got some structure to it, but we hold it kind of light. Yeah.
Maybe would you be willing to
Sure.
read the letter?
Yep. Okay. So this is a fellow, I think he was, he committed murder when he was, 17, and he was sentenced as an adult, and got a life sentence. And he's in, where is he? He's in Iowa. So this last letter, he wrote a little bit about his practice and, kind of what's been going on. He says, I've been studying Buddhism for around 14 years now, 37 years of a life sentence. If it wasn't for Buddhism, I don't think I could have made it all these years. A guy let me read a book on Buddhism by Lama Zopa Rinpoche, Make Your Mind an Ocean, from the Liberation Prison Project. And Venerable Robina Curtin gave me my vows. We got a small group going, around 4 or 5. They are studying the path of the Tao. I like my Tibetan tradition. So you see how, they, I Ching and Tao and all of those things they do. He likes the middle path called the Mahayana. I had an excellent teacher called Losang Tendar in the Nalanda Monastery in France. In prisons, it's hard sometimes to get material, books, things like that. And we can't get the original paper, usually just a photocopy most of the time. And that's because there's so many drugs that come in now that are not visible. So what they do now is soak the letters, the paper in fentanyl, and then send it to someone, and then they take chunks of the paper and eat it, and usually overdose, but sometimes they don't. But so it's a mess. So everything that comes into any incarcerated person now is photocopied by a whole nother business that does that. So they never get, what we actually write. They get a photocopy. Let's see. And then he says, but that is how prison is nowadays. Buddhism helps out a lot. We have a lot of books now that have been donated. I personally like the books from Sravasti Abbey in Washington. It is a real good place to start a person on the path of Buddhism. They'll help you from the beginning. There is all kinds of information they will help you, from the precepts to meditation practices. They'll help prisoners out with books and newsletter. And in December, they start the retreat from afar, which is 3 months of sending them weekly information about the retreat that we're doing or the practice. And then we, if they can, they send a picture and we put it up on our little reader board so that we can see them and we feel like we're doing the practice with them. And they love that. He's done that practice for 8 or 9 years easily. I like practicing the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. That's the perfect foundation to build upon. While doing these, you can work on the precepts. You don't need anything fancy, a place to sit. That's all you need. If you can get a picture of the Buddha, that's good. So he's very sweet. Yeah.
Sadhu. Would you tell any other stories, like any of you, just instances or stories you found inspiring or moving, things that have stuck with you?
Yeah, there was one fellow that told me this story that he got a new roommate, and the roommate had a really reputation for being a really bad guy. And so he was kind of, apprehensive. But so the guy came in and they started talking, and it seems like it was going okay. He was a force. He was, and people were scared of him. But, this guy was just kind of, trying to make it work. And everything was going along pretty good, and he kind of calmed down and thought, well, this is going to be all right, I think. Then one day, they were in the mess hall, and he looked up, and this guy was coming right for him. He was just making a beeline, and he looks like, there was like smoke coming out of his ears. He was just so angry. And so this guy that told me this story, he just started visualizing this beautiful white light coming from his heart, and he was just giving it to this guy. just giving it to this guy. And the guy came, and he came right up to him and right in his face, talking so forcefully, he was spitting at him even. And the guy said, like, what the heck are you doing talking bad about me? And this fellow said, he just held his place. He kept still, just sending this loving energy to this guy. And he looked him in the eye and he said, if you think about it for a minute, you know that I wouldn't do that. And then he felt the guy's energy turn, and then the guy said to him, well, you better not ever. And he turned around and left. and so he felt so good that he could use something that was just pure compassion and love, and it disarmed this mean character. So that's one good story.
Reminds me of the story with the elephant that the Buddha tamed through metta. Nalagiri, yeah. Please.
Yeah.
Please, Venerable. Anything?
So there's this incarcerated man in Wyoming, and he asked for tales of the Buddha's former lives. So this is a translation of the Jataka tales. We don't send it very often. I mean, I think it sort of looks like a children's book. It has illustrations, and I'll send it if someone asks for it, but I don't typically send it. So he requested it, and then a little while later, I received a letter from him saying that he reads it to his son every night. They go through one tale a night. And he said his wife is a Christian, so this is how he can introduce his son to the Dharma, is by reading it. I'm guessing over the phone. Yeah, so that's really touching.
I like the story of Al. He's been writing Venerable Chodron for years and years. And I know some of his story because he started writing his autobiography in jail. And apparently it's many hundred pages long. And reading about his childhood, I just cried and cried because it was so horrible. You can't imagine the things that he has been through and a lot of these prisoners have been through. But he recently sent us a picture of him in a graduation gown and cap, and he got his degree in chaplaincy, and he wrote a book. What's it called?
Children's book?
Yeah, the children's book. Gavin Discovers Happiness, yeah. So we have it downstairs in the book nook. And actually there was an email recently about someone in Ukraine who was using this book to connect with their child. So it's really beautiful that he's able to touch people in this way, even though he's locked up in prison. And so he's working on his autobiography, and he's also working on another children's book. So he's really passionate and fired up about the Dharma and wanting to share it with everyone.
And he's another one that did his action, I think he was 16 maybe, convicted as an adult, life sentence. And he's just brilliant. And, he's making it work, for himself. Yeah, so it's very interesting.
Curious if any of you have any advice for people who might be considering going into or volunteering time to work for some kind of Dharma chaplaincy or Dharma prison project where you can do it through Zen centers, through secular Buddhist associations, and what would you advise for people that are curious about that?
Yeah, the most important thing is that you, how can I say this? Let's see. On the one hand, who you're talking to or writing to or working with, they are not their the thing that they did. They're so much more than that. So there's that piece of it. But on the other side of it, since they've been in prison, especially if they've been in prison for a long time, they know how to work systems to get what they want. And so if you're going to do this, you have to be very aware of just to say it in the kind of common vernacular, if you're getting played. And they will do that. They don't often even know they're doing it. So it's up to us to not fall for that. And, you'll get lots of, positive feedback and accolades and da-da-da. And then here comes the ask, could you send me whatever? So you really have to be kind of on your toes and aware of flattery and not taking that bait. Yeah, so that's the most important thing, I think. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I think related to that, anytime you go into a prison, there's trainings that you do with the prison staff. One of the points of that is to keep clear boundaries. And really, they talk about that in terms of thinking about why you're there, in terms of it's about them, not about you, And so in Buddhist practice, we also think about that. And, in terms of really focus on you're there to benefit the people who are incarcerated. It's not about what we get from it. Of course, like Venerable Jigme said, they're so appreciative, they're so grateful. But to be clear about why we're going in, or if we're just writing letters to someone, why we're writing, and to keep that motivation very clear in our mind. Because I've had people write me and they're looking just for like a pen pal, in a more secular way, just friendship, or even maybe they're looking for something more, and and I talk about the Dharma. That's why we're doing this work. We're sharing the Dharma to those who are interested. And so I think that's the most important thing, is to get really clear about why you're doing this work.
This question's a bit loaded, but intentionally so, or interesting. What has your work with the prisoners taught you about what hell might be like? And if you had to image it now, like what that would, flavors or kind of that thought. And has it made you believe in evil more or less?
Well, that's interesting. This, the letter that I wrote, or that I read, James is his name, some months back he wrote me and he said, do you believe that everybody could be just totally evil? And that's how he feels about himself, that he is evil. And how can he not be evil? So I think hell for the folks in prison is to be invisible or violated. So that's what hell is for them. And no identity. They are called by number. Nobody calls them by their name, it's by number. And so when we go and we put our hand out and they actually, shake it, they are so appreciative just to have somebody talk to them like they're seen. So that to me is what hell would be, not being seen. Yeah, and when we used to walk into when we were doing the other group, the minimum, and on the side there's grass there, and then there's sidewalks with a line down the middle of it, and there's a sign there that says, if you step off the sidewalk, you get an infraction, and it's code RCW 323 or whatever. So that's what they have. Every moment with everything. They cannot do anything without permission. So it's very restrictive and very diminishing. Yeah.
In terms of hell, one of the incarcerated people who's attending our class now very early on in our class, opened up about his depression. And several weeks back, he told us what his job is in the prison. And that is, he's the janitor serving the midnight shift in solitary confinement. So that to me sounds a bit like hell in terms of having that job. But more generally, I would say feeling alone. I think that is a huge suffering, not only for those incarcerated who are in solitary. I mean, obviously that's horrible and very traumatic. But for those who, like during COVID, had a spiritual yearning and didn't have spiritual companions to support them, to be supported by, I think that would be incredibly difficult. To be in a big dorm room, to have people yelling and screaming and hitting and playing music and watching TV, and you want to meditate, feeling different in that environment and not having the conducive conditions that are really so valuable for spiritual practice. I think that would be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, it seems like feeling that you are evil or that there's nothing redeeming about you seems like a hellish experience too. And we keep reinforcing that they do have many good qualities. And by sharing our experience and how in the evenings we often reflect back on our day and reflect on the good things we did that day and the way we benefited people. So trying to share our practice, our experience with them, and so maybe they could do the same thing and reflect on, yeah, I benefited this person, I helped my cellmate, and I do have good qualities, and we can grow these qualities day by day. So I think that can really turn things around, not seeing themselves as evil, bad, irredeemable people, but actually people who have a really good chance in life to do something really powerful. Even if they don't ever get out of prison, they might be there for life, but they can have a really meaningful experience in prison. And it's amazing. I've heard several times people say, getting into prison was the best thing that happened to me. That drops my jaw. I can't believe anyone would ever say that. But they say, if I was on the outside, I'd still be on the streets, with the same, people, bad experiences. But here I have the Dharma, I have a supportive group of people, and my life is totally changed around. It's really positive now.
I would just say to this fellow that the letter I read, James, over the years, he has been part of the group that trains dogs that are found or sheltered or whatever, and teaches them, and then they find homes for them. And so he does that. And so that's one of the things that has made such a difference in his life from before he was in that program to now. You can see the difference that somebody, just loves him unconditional, like, dogs do. And that opens up your heart, and then he also, he has a job with a chaplain in the library, so he does that kind of work too. And then the third thing that he does is that he, at night, on the late night shift, he does suicide watch for folks that are in solitary and in trouble mentally, and he sits with them. So this is a guy that, he's really come a long way. Yeah.
Just want to share one of the guys who comes to the class at Airway Heights. I believe he's a lifer. He told me several years back that he feels freer than his sister in Miami. And I mean, and it's obvious. He said his practice is mainly gratitude. And you can tell. I mean, he's really practicing the Dharma. Yeah.
There's this concept in Buddhism of a deva duta, or heavenly messengers, and there are 4 of them. So the first one is an aging person. The second one is a sick person. The third one is a dead person. in the fourth one is sometimes portrayed or sometimes given as a monastic. You see like the trouble with samsara in the first three, and then a monastic, here's the way out. But actually in the theravada, in the Pali Canon, there's a more prominent list which lists an aging person, a sick person, a dead person, and a prisoner. A prisoner is the fourth heavenly messenger, and the Buddha elaborates there and just says, this is how you learn about the effects, the results of negative action, the punishment of negative action. And I'm curious, for me that's always been, it's a little bit intellectual because I've met people who've come out of prison, but I haven't met people in prison. So I'm curious if either or any of you have any thoughts about how that fits in, how a prisoner could be a heavenly messenger, teach some dharmic lesson about life.
Mm. So the prior chaplain, Chaplain Lucci, that was at Airway Heights, he took us out to lunch once. I think it was Venerable Tarpa and me and somebody else. Anyhow, he was saying how when he first went to Airway, there were lockdowns all the time. You know, fights break out and then they lock down everybody, and everybody has to stay in their cell, and you know, everything is, they can't go out to the programs they're involved in, etc. And he said that as the Buddhist group started getting going and really was taking hold, he said, I noticed in the medium security part of the prison that the lockdowns started getting less and less and less and less. And he said it is because of the Buddhist group. And many of the other incarcerated around this group, they would call many of them Buddha. So it had a very strong influence on the population there. And so, yeah, I believe that. And we talked to them about that too, how they can model behavior and make their home a safer home, you know. Mm.
It strikes me the monastery just got a statue of Earth Store Bodhisattva, Siddhigarbhas, who's known as the Bodhisattva of the king of all vows, where he's vowed to not attain awakening until all the hells are emptied of beings. And just these images you give of some of those prisoners living out sentences and yet having found real purpose there. I suppose, you know, there's, honestly, we've covered a lot of ground. The question I would like to ask is, you spoke about how hell is invisibility, powerlessness, anonymity, all these things. And it strikes me, well, first, it's interesting, the parallels between a monastery and a prison. I don't know how much you feel on that yet. Okay, curious on that one. But within that, like, I mean, maybe that is it, is like, from a sense of total powerlessness, Buddhism and practice seems to allow freedom and nobility within the same exact external environment. Would you speak to that? What does Buddhism give people?
Well, it gives them hope. It gives them a mirror. It gives them the space and time to reflect on their life and to forgive themselves. And we watch them do all that. Yeah.
I would say it gives them a new perspective on their life. Yes, so many talk about how their time, they're seeing now that their time is valuable, and they're using their time in a meaningful way, you know, which was so different before meeting the Dharma, where you can waste away a lot of time in prison, but you can also make it highly meaningful. I also just want to share, this is sort of related, I think. One incarcerated man, he's quite an artist. And actually many of the incarcerated people we write to are, and some that we see in the class in the local prison. And so they use their artistic ability and put it towards expressions of the Dharma and the Buddha. And it's incredibly beautiful and inspiring. And I can just imagine, I mean, I don't know, but I can imagine them like, painting that image of the Buddha and other incarcerated people seeing that. So this one man, he sent a package to the Abbey, and I was the first one to open it. And it was this little thing in this like bubble wrap, and I'm unwrapping it. And it's a Buddha carved out of soap. A bar of soap, because that's all he had. So he's using what he had to make an image of the Buddha. And then in one letter he wrote, he was speaking about how he was mailing all of these letters back home because they're only allowed a certain amount of personal effects. So all of these letters that he's received from family and friends and Dharma practitioners, and even his ex-wife, he has been sending home. And he was asking himself, why am I sending these home? And then he realized, or he came to this this idea. He said, I'll make a paper mache Buddha out of all the letters I've received. So he said, I'll take all of the letters from family and friends, and that will be the paper mache Buddha. I'll take all the letters from all of the Dharma practitioners who have supported my practice, and that will be the lotus that will support the Buddha. And all of the angry letters from my ex-wife and my even angrier replies will be burned, and that will be the mud that the lotus will grow out of. And when I get home, I'll be bowing to everyone who's supported my practice. And I just love that. Yeah.
I think a lot of us, and also the incarcerated, feel this incredible mental freedom as they continue to practice and study, turning away from these rigid ways of thinking that really imprison us, and instead opening our minds to this incredible vastness of the Dharma, questioning everything we've ever been taught, questioning our reality. Is this actually true? Are things rigid in these ways that my parents have taught me, my friends have taught me? Is it possible that they're all wrong? Yeah, it's probably possible. And this incredible vastness of wanting to benefit countless sentient beings in countless universes, our mind just becomes, like you said, an ocean, like Lama Zobar said. And so I think just them touching into this and stepping into it and really feeling it on a deeper and deeper level day by day really has a profound impact on them and on us.
And two, just to be able to witness a person getting the light bulb to go off about if I don't react to the crazy around me, then I'll have a happy life. And to see them actualize that, and to see them getting calmer and more grounded and happier, and then helping others. It's like watching this, unfold in front of you. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Just to go back to the man who said he was struggling with depression, he told us recently that this Buddhist class has been more helpful to him in the past few months than his whatever treatment or medicine he was taking for depression. And I really think it's the support, the connection with other people who care, and especially the other incarcerated men. They go around and talk about how they're working with their mind, and they're seen and heard. I think that must be so, well, and I know for myself, it's so nourishing to be seen and heard.
And I think when you can't control anything in your external world, when everything is really, really rigid, you can control your mind and what's going on, and you have some power there and some autonomy. So I think that's really freeing too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Abhayagiri monastery that we ordained at in California, they have a free distribution book. Basically, it's just very similar to what you do, but they'll send books to anybody. But it just so happens that I think like 70-80% of the books they send out are to prisoners. It just maybe because people are just face up against the wall with their own dukkha and suffering that they can't do much about it other than to look for a way out. We're coming close to our closing time, but just maybe wanted to just open it up to any of you about closing reflections about the whole project and your interaction with it.
I would say for me, especially at first, all of my ideas about what a prisoner was, and especially when I started to learn about what they did, and my reaction internally with that, I had to, or I got to, come to terms with how am I actually viewing this person, because they're not that one thing that they did. And to be able to then have a connection with them, to see the full complement of who they are, then it really dismantled all of this, the judgment about they're bad, they're this, they're that. There's no place for that in there at all. They're some of the kindest people I have ever met. So, yeah. So that's a very beautiful thing to experience and to work on my own mind. They have taught me, I'm sure, much more than I ever gave to them. Every time we go in there, there's a new something.
I think one of the things I've been reflecting on is how, well, first of all, they're just people, and how they're so different, just the way in which they come to the Dharma, relate to the Dharma, it's so unique. And it's really been beneficial in helping me develop some skillful means, because I have seen, and it's been rare occasions, but I've received some letters back that were not so appreciative. It was like, why are you telling me that? You already told me that, or, and it helps me grow, It's like, oh, well, that wasn't the right thing to say. But for all of those others, it was really helpful. And I just see how the Dharma impacts people in such profound ways. It is really incredible. This one man who was incarcerated in Florida, we've been corresponding for 5 years, and I have so many letters back and forth. And he's one of those who writes very long-winded, verbose, but with very flowery language about the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, about making these huge aspirational prayers. It was just incredible. Maybe in the past month or so, I got an email saying that I had missed a call. There was a voicemail from this man, who we've made so many prayer requests, or so many prayers for. On almost every letter, he's asking, can you make prayers for me and my family? And so we feel like we have this connection with him. I feel like that. And I called him back, and he called us on the way home from prison. He had just been released, and what did he want to do but call the Abbey to say thank you? And our conversation wasn't long. We spoke a lot longer in the past 5 years on these very long letters. But it didn't need to be long. He wanted to appreciate what we're doing and appreciate the Dharma and make that connection. And he's already called Venerable Thubten. And he's, back on our prayer list. So we keep that connection going.
Yeah, I just feel a lot of gratitude to be a part of this. I feel really grateful. Like you were saying, people get out and they write us emails and call and they ask, how can I give back? You guys have made such an incredible impact on my life. And it's not us, it's the Dharma, and it's just working through us. But they want to volunteer, they want to do something, and so we try to connect them. And so, they can do transcribing or hopefully visit in the future. So I can see, again, like the incredible impact that the Dharma has on people's lives. And it doesn't have to be something really huge, just small things day by day by day. And it accumulates and it changes lives, and like ripples in the water, it affects communities and states and nations. And I'm learning not to underestimate the power of small actions. That's so important.
Thank you, all three of you. And people can't see this, but Venerable Chodron's sitting in the back as well. And Venerable, thank you for creating this whole movement and program. Would you like to come up and say anything as a final? Yeah.
So one thing, when you said, what did prison give them? Compassion. Now, how do you get... Prison doesn't give them compassion, as we think of it. But when they're in prison, like somebody said, it changed their life, because if they had been out on the streets, they probably would have been dead by now, they'd say. And what really touches them so much is that they can generate compassion for others. And that the ability to have the compassion of a bodhisattva, the compassion of a Buddha, the thought that, after what I've done in my life, and most of these people have not had happy lives, childhood abuse and not good education and everything, It's the pipeline to prison, as they call it. And then they get there and they hear a little bit of Dharma, and, oh, wow. Even somebody like me could have that kind of compassion. And that really does something. The other thing I'd like to mention is a little commercial, because, yes, you know me. So right now there's a book in the works called The Key to Compassion, with the subtitle, Finding Compassion Where You Least Expect It. And it's about my work in working in prisons. So the first section is, my experience, how I got involved, how it infected me. And then little vignettes that were taken from letters that people wrote me over, the time, about their experience in prison, because I really think that people on the outside don't have any idea what prison is really like. And it's not hunky-dory. But how do you maintain yourself and not just fall into the negativity? So I think people on the outside don't really understand that there's a feeling of, okay, they're criminals, they're judged by the worst thing they've ever done in their life, they're a criminal, they're hopeless, imprison them, lock them up, throw away the key, finish, now we're going to go have some tea and go to the beach, and, And it's not like that. There's a lot of talent and potential there that doesn't get used because they have to have a very strict discipline container.
Thank you, Venerable. Yeah. In the images of the hell realms, often there's a picture of a monastic floating above. And I've always thought that was a symbol of hope, of reference, of witness, and just anumodana. Thank you for all of you for being that and for creating that whole project, and for welcoming us to Sravasti. It doesn't feel like a prison. So, yeah. Thank you, Venerable.